So we're going to talk about layers here in this little movie. Um, Basically, the way that layers work in Illustrator is that you do have a layers panel or palette, window, whatever it is you want to call it. Generally, it's up by default. You should be able to find it with all of your other panels, um, usually located on the right side of your screen. If for whatever reason you don't see a layers panel, you can go to Window, Layers, and that'll either open it or bring it to the forefront if it's hidden behind a different tab. Um, the layers panel works, fairly close to how the Photoshop layers panel works if you've worked with Photoshop, but with quite a bit unique characteristics as well. And the first unique characteristic is that you start off on layer 1, and I'm just going to draw with the pencil a little bit. So every time I draw a new shape, it's all pretty much bundled into layer 1. So anything I do right now, drawing either with a pencil or a pen tool, or if I went into shapes or brushes, whatever, any artwork that I generate is going to be put into layer 1. And even if I was to bring in a picture and place it, it would be put into layer 1. Everything is kept in layer 1 until I specifically tell Illustrator that I would like to work with another layer. What's actually happening kind of under the hood is that I'm creating a bunch of sub-layers. If I open up layer 1, you'll see there's a little triangle there that you can click on, twirl it open, and you end up seeing that there is a recording for every object, shape, or path, whatever it was, that I drew here today. So these are paths, and each path has its own placement in a layer that is unique to each other path. So the very first one that I drew is this guy at the bottom, because it starts stacking upwards. So the earliest artwork is pushed down to the bottom, and the most recent artwork is floating up at the top. So this this relationship to a layer, the fact that a layer can be open and that you can have things happening within the layer that still keep them separate from other elements, is one of the unique factors of the layers in Illustrator. These paths here, sublayers, whatever you want to call them, operate in also kind of a unique way where I can select different paths in the layer window, but it actually doesn't select the path for me on my artboard. If I was to get my selection tool and actually click on one of these elements, these objects, a bounding box is displayed around the artwork. I can see the path, I can see my points, and in my layers window, it still doesn't highlight the layer that I'm on. The layer that is highlighted is still the layer that I had clicked on earlier in the layers panel. But what does show up is that there's this little box on the very right hand side of that path, and that is telling me that it is this one right here in the layers panel that is currently selected on my artboard. So if you just kind of watch and see what happens as you click on different elements, you'll see that that little box relocates. So now it's telling me that this second to the top path here is the one that I've selected. That's because it was the second to the last stroke. But that little box is showing me what's selected on the canvas or the artboard, not the fact that that layer is selected. So you can go through and select these things, and it does nothing. It does nothing to your artwork. The idea is to actually select it on your artboard, or you can also click in an empty area along any of those paths, and that will select that path on the artboard. So you can see that as I go through and select different layers by using this little box, that actually selects them on the artboard. So there's a total difference between selecting these sublayers versus selecting the little like activation box on the right there. There is a name for that thing, and I once knew it, but right now I really don't remember what it's called. Target, maybe? If I hover over it, will it tell me? Well, it indicates selected art. Yep. Not a very good name, but so if I were to collapse layer 1 so that it's all bundled together, I could select the entire layer 1 by clicking in that same area on the side of layer 1, and what that does is it selects everything that is bundled underneath layer 1's wing, basically. And that guarantees that everything on layer 1 is going to be selected. At that point I could do whatever it is that I wanted to do to it, modify it, move it, whatever. So that's a little bit about sublayers and selecting. Now a layer can be renamed and also set up with different parameters by double clicking on it. When you double click on it, it opens up our layer options, and this is where you can set a name for your layer. You can adjust its color so that it's selected under a different color on the artboard. We can also do things like set a layer as a template. You can lock a layer. You can choose to show the layer or not. You can choose to have that layer be printed or not. You can have it be previewed or not. And then images that are on a layer, not artwork, but images, you can dim to 50%, which kind of just takes their intensity away while you work. It's something that you won't find too helpful. But generally the preset is that the layer will be shown, the layer will be printed, and it will be previewed. If you were to change any of those things, if I was to click on lock and then hit OK, then what actually is adjusted, or what's different over here in the layers panel, is that there is a lock area, a little checkbox to lock a layer. And if a layer is locked, you cannot select anything on that layer. So you see right now my cursor is no longer a selection arrow. It is a little pencil with a slash through it, which means it's locked. I can't do anything to it. I wouldn't be able to draw on this layer. I won't be able to select things. This layer is permanently locked. To unlock it, you just unclick, or whatever. You click off the lock so that it's not checked anymore. Or you can double click back on the layer options and then uncheck lock. If I take off show and print, then that basically just means that we're hiding it. That little visibility eyeball thing that is on the left side of the layers panel is your visibility. So you can lock layers manually, or in the layer options window you can make layers be shown or hidden by clicking on the eyeball or by doing it in the layers option. When a layer is not shown or hidden, it is not going to print, obviously. So that should give you an idea that anything that is visible generally in a project on the artboard will be printed. However, there is the option to say I'd like to show a layer, but I would not like to print it. That's a great thing for building templates or leaving notes for yourself, or if you're passing a document on to another artist, and you want to make sure that those notes or edits or whatever it is that you've put in your document don't get printed. You can choose for an entire layer to not print, and that comes in handy. I think we'll actually get into a project where, we will. It'll be our magazine project. We'll be using this to our advantage. For now, I'm just going to hit OK because I like the way things are here. Adding new layers is as easy as going to either the little flyout menu on the very right side of the layers palette. You can see that you have a new layer, and then you have something called a new sublayer. So you can create your own sublayers that don't have anything in them. They're just empty. And once I do that, it wants to know what my sublayer will be called, what color it'll be, and so on. So I'll just hit cancel, not do that. But that would just make an empty sublayer to a layer. And sometimes sublayers are convenient because you get to keep things nice and tidy within a layer, but still have some flexibility of layers within themselves. If you're trying to do different options for designs, leaving your, the different takes on text or different placement of things, it's pretty. It's a good deal. So either a new layer or new sublayer. You can also duplicate layers. You can open up your options from here. It's the same as double clicking. Clipping masks and isolation mode, we'll get into this later. Flattening artwork and collecting a new layer. This is stuff that we'll eventually get to. Same with releasing layers and building and all that junk that is down here. For the most part, just making new layers and managing your layers is what we're talking about at this moment. So there are some buttons at the bottom, and you have a new layer button, you have a new sublayer button, or you have this make and release clipping mask button. If you were to click on the new layer button, it gives you a new layer. If you option click on it, it'll give you the layer options immediately, so you can name something, choose the color you want that layer to be, whether or not it's locked or printed, whatever. So now that I have layer 2 up, if I go grab my pencil tool and I make some lines, you see that since layer 2 was selected and activated, then that's where my artwork is going to go. If I open that up, now I have 4 new paths under layer 2. This new layer has a stacking order relationship with layer 1. Since it is on top, that means that if these lines were to cross over any other artwork on a layer beneath it, that they would have visual priority. They're going to be on top of the image. So you can manage layers in their stacking order by dragging layers around up or down and putting them underneath or on top of other layers. But you want to be very careful when you're stacking layers or reordering them. You want to make sure that you see the line that actually goes all the way through the little layer bar. It has a triangle that is between layers, because you'll see that if you hover over an existing layer, you can actually bundle a layer into another layer. So what I just did is I just took layer 2 and put it into layer 1. Now I have one layer again that is represented by all the artwork. But I still can go into layer 1 and open up layer 2, and I can see my paths and all that stuff. And at any time, if I want to, I can pull it out. And this is something that sounds really like basic, but if you're not comfortable moving those layers around, and if you aren't paying attention and not visually seeing the difference between stacking a layer above or below another versus actually putting it in a layer, then it's going to cause you a lot of trouble down the road. So I mean, practice it. It sounds so silly to say, to practice moving layers, but you need to learn and know and feel comfortable at how Illustrator behaves so that you can not end up with anything unexpected. So just give that a little try. Make a layer, put some artwork in there, and move it around. What I'm going to just show you real quick before we end this up, little movie, is if I was to select layer 2, you'll see that those lines that are part of layer 2 are shown in red, and that layer 1 is shown in blue. This is how Illustrator behaves. Every new layer gets a new color. So if I was to add another new layer, that layer and any artwork on it will now be green. So here's a shape that I've drawn on layer 3. Layer 3's color is green, and if I select it, there's the green selection and green bounding box. And that's helpful just to make sure that we're able to visibly differentiate our elements and understand which layers that they're on. And if you don't like the color, you can always just double click on it and go in and say that you'd like to change it to, whatever, teal or brick red, purple, Sure, purple. So now it's all purple. That is going to conclude our intro to layers. We're going to move on to some more complex stuff here next.